All right, folks, welcome to the Innovators Inside podcast. Today, Ian and I are chatting with Marcelo Calbucci. Marcelo's an entrepreneur, a technologist, an innovator, and author with more than 25 years of experience in the tech industry. He's held key engineering and leadership roles at Microsoft and Amazon. Marcelo's founded 6 startups in Seattle and London, authored over 1,000 articles, and holds 11 patents. His new book, The PR FAQ Framework, Adapting Amazon's Innovation Framework to Work for You, reveals how Amazon's signature working backwards process can be adapted by founders and product leaders to drive innovation through narrative-driven clarity and alignment. So thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. There's a lot to unpack there. That's quite the journey. But before we dive in, I'd like to play a game if that's okay.
Yeah, let's do it. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited.
Awesome. Okay, this is going to be a lot of fun. So we're going to go through what I like to call the rapid fire section. So I'm going to switch up between you and Ian, and I'm going to ask you a question, and you have to just kind of answer the first thing that pops into your mind.
Ooh, that's dangerous. Let's do it.
I know it can be. It can. I'm
it's
going
a little
to
scary, but super fun.
I promise I will be kind. Okay. What's something that you used to believe about success that you've completely outgrown? Go, Marcelo.
I would say that persistence not necessarily leads to success. Knowing when to quit is as important as knowing when to continue.
Amen.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. Okay, Ian, what's a non-tech hobby or skill you wish you could master overnight?
Overnight guitar.
Oh, really?
I mean, if it was truly overnight, are you kidding me? Like, so I'm a terrible piano player. Like, don't tell like my teacher from 3rd grade. But guitar is portable. I was just out camping this summer. Someone else had a guitar, whipped it out, played some tunes. Are you kidding? If only.
Yeah, so would that be like a shredding kind of a thing, or just more like like do 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 do, or is that more
a
like
little more
campfire?
A little more campfire, a little more folksy.
Okay. All right. Marcelo, which past version of yourself do you miss the most and why?
I'm very happy where I am right now. Of course, like when you're young, your body adjusts better to exercise and like parties and everything else. So that would be good to, have that again.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, if we were doing this as a game or a drinking game Friday night around the campfire, I would not be holding up the way I was 20 years ago.
I don't know, and it's nice to live in the present,
Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. So, just even based out on your bio, Marcelo, I've got another one for you. London or Seattle? Hot take.
Ooh, I love both. The quality of life in Seattle is amazing, but London has the culture, the restaurants, and the travel around Europe that is really hard to beat as well.
Yeah, I've never been to London. I've gotta get over there.
I'm not going to call you out on the hedge too much because like Seattle's my home and it's amazing. So obviously it wins, but oh yeah, London's pretty incredible. I'm jealous. I've never had the chance to live there, just visit. Like beyond the culture and the scene, what was different about life in London? Is it the tech? Is the tech world wildly different? Is the world of entrepreneurship different? The demographics, like contrast the two cities for us.
A few things I think stand out there. Like Seattle is a nature city. It's a car city. Like you have ski nearby, you have hiking nearby, you have water, like you have all kinds of outdoor activities, right? London is more like a foot and walk city. Where you have culture everywhere. So that's very different. The entrepreneurial community is very different as well. Seattle is the home of Microsoft and Amazon. So it has a super strong cloud presence, AI presence, a lot of startups focus on B2B. London has that, London in the past was very much a financial district. right, for the world, not even a district, a financial city for the world, and also an advertising city. Like they have very strong ad and marketing industry there. And because of that, a lot of startups from London are consumer startups or fintech startups. So that is very different from Seattle. Seattle doesn't have a ton of fintech and it doesn't have a lot of consumer startups.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Love that. Although you kind of sold me on, I kind of want to move to Seattle now. That was.
It's great. You'll be welcome here.
All right. I have one more rapid fire question. It's for both of you, though, so you can kind of feel free to just both of you answer at the same time. This question is known to start fights, so we'll see how this goes. Microwave, awesome or not?
It's Marcelo, what do you think?
I think it's awesome. Why not?
It's awesome. I'm not going to disagree with that.
Really?
It's awesome.
I don't have a microwave.
Okay, so look, here's the deal. Mike, you can ruin food so quickly in a microwave. So quickly. But if you know how to use it, you want to know the most entertaining way I use my microwave?
Oh no.
No, it's not no. This is a brilliant thing. I've got a young daughter. She has stuffies that she likes, and there are stuffies that are filled with microwavable stuffing. In this case, I think it's kind of like a potpourri mix of stuff. It is designed to be microwaved, and you microwave it for 1 minute, and then you get a nice, warm, and pleasant smelling stuffy filled with plants or whatever they have in there. And you know what? Can't do that without a microwave. You put that thing in the oven, it's going to burn.
Okay. Wow. Okay. That's
you
kind of
learn
cool.
something new every day.
Yeah.
Innovation right there. That's innovation.
Let's repurpose the microwave. Okay, Marcelo, why do you think the microwave is awesome? Did you have like a go-to thing that you always put in the microwave, like
not necessarily? For me, microwave is just a tool, right? If you know how to use it too well, there are many professional chefs that use microwave and know how to use it. I think one of the things that people don't know is you can steam vegetables really fast in a microwave. You can cook potatoes in 4 or 5 minutes in the microwave, and it's the same process as steaming, as long as you do it correctly. So it's a great tool.
Very true. All right. See, this is how minds are changed. Our important conversations like this. But moving out of the rapid fire, that was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for playing. But Marcelo, I'm really curious to know what led you to be sitting here with us today on the podcast.
Yeah, I have this passion for innovation and invention, and I always been attracted to everything that relates to that. I think that's why I end up in tech. The difference between technology and other industries is you can see the results in hours. You don't have to wait months or years to see anything, right? And like if you're building something physical, it takes so long for you to get that feedback loop going. Right? In many other industries are like that. In tech, it's like you can do something by yourself on your laptop, see the results. If you like it, like you put out there in the world, and you get feedback immediately as well. So I like that process, that fast pace of tech. And I love what you are doing with this podcast, spreading like information about innovation and like how to be better at that skill.
Well, and I'm glad to hear that. Like, you're hitting on some of like the best of innovation, right? You weren't even explicit about it, but you talked about iteration and the ability to throw something out there, see if it sticks, iterate quickly. And tech, I think, has, as you said, created such a wonderful environment and mechanism to be able to try and build. And the fun thing about this is now more so than ever, right? You've got people vibe coding. You've got people playing with AI systems. You've got people being able to stand up a stack and get something through a distribution network that would have been incredibly difficult 20 years ago. Do you think more and more people are going to get this iterative innovation kind of bug like you have?
Yeah, I think so. And the other thing that you didn't mention is because these tools are more accessible, problems that weren't being solved before because they were costing enough that they didn't justify existing can be solved, right? So there is tons of small business and needs out there that there was no mass market for it. So no big company would tackle, startups would say like, I don't want to go there because it's too small. It's not going to be worth it. Who wants to build a product that can only generate $1 million in revenue? That wasn't worth for a startup to invest. But now, like as an individual, you can build the solution for yourself or for other people that have a similar problem because it's so cheap to build and to operate these systems that I see we're going to have an explosion of, let's say, fragmented solutions, right? That address very small and niche problems.
I love that. And in fact, I don't know what you're seeing. We're seeing that. So, when we go out, we talk to thousands and thousands of startups a year. We invest in a bunch. That's kind of the core of Alchemist's business. And one of the things that we are absolutely seeing is exactly what you just said. Hyper specialized solutions that you look at. And if you look at it from a traditional venture scale kind of returns lens as an investor, they look really actually challenging in some ways. But if you look at it from the point of view of, there is a very healthy market. There's probably room for 10, 20, 50, maybe 1,000 players addressing this market segmented around the world. And they can, you can build these sustainable, profitable businesses quickly. Things start to look really interesting and really different, I think, than the way that some of us that have kind of grown up in the tech industry in the last 20 years have thought about the world.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think the VC industry, I wouldn't say it's going to have to change, but there's going to be an offshoot of investors who are capable of supporting much smaller scale operations, right? So the goal is not to get to 100 million ARR. It's more like, hey, can we get to 1 to 10 million ARR and like generate profits out of it, generate distributions, right? Or dividends, or even like sell the business once you get to a certain scale. So that doesn't exist today. You can see some, hints of that. Tiny, for example, which is, from British Columbia, is trying to do like the smaller scale PE kind of thing. But I still feel like we need the smaller scale VC kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it is. We're talking about innovation and this industry around us that I think many of our listeners are familiar with is being forced to change. And I think we are seeing leading indicators, right? Big VC firms are diversifying into different types of finance. But this emergence of, the small specialized startup brings out a problem that is unsolved. And isn't that how innovation starts, right? People have to respond to this problem area. It's really fun. It's really dynamic.
Yeah, that's right.
I have a question about that. So do you think that leads to a world in which business goes back regionally? Because like if you think about it, a lot of these companies aim to be global, or like they aim to like enter different markets. But if you've got all these tiny little, not tiny, but smaller solutions that are not necessarily looking to scale or looking to cross into other markets, do you see almost like less of like a global industry and more regionalized solutions?
I think it's both. I don't think it's one or the other. I think regional solutions always suffered because they never had scale to get the capital that they need to evolve. Right now, you don't need that capital anymore. Like if your city has a very particular problem around, let's say, small business or restaurants or school or government, like now it can be solved in a viable fashion. But also you had a lot of niches. Like let's talk about both of you doing this podcast. Like it's not there is like that many podcasters out there, right? Let's say maybe there is a few 100,000, maybe 1 million podcasters. Maybe a subsection of these podcasters have a problem that has not been addressed because it's not big enough, and it doesn't matter where they live, right? Like let's say podcasters about tech. They are talking about vibe coding and technology and operating systems and like hardcore tech. Like maybe they have a way that they want to include code in their podcast. I don't know. I'm just making up, right? Sure. Like the problem will not be solved because there is only about 1,000 of them. Right now, you can solve because it's viable, because the cost of operating that tool is going to be much lower, even the cost of building that tool. And that information spreads more virally as well, because usually these niches, they are more connected, right? They have a community that know each other and like share information of what tool they are using and all that stuff. In the past, like no one would touch this, right? The big tools is like not interested in creating a tool that only 1,000 podcasters are going to use.
You know, we're all in the world of innovation and entrepreneurship. And I think we all feel, at least I feel, Marcelo, having looked at your stuff, I fundamentally believe that you feel a mandate to try and support ambitious innovators and entrepreneurs in the world around us. What do we have to do differently as ecosystem players to help entrepreneurs and founders think about the world that they're in today? Is there any behavior patterns you've seen, either yourself or others?
You hit a note here that I think it's very important, which is really the the impact that community has in fostering innovation, right? And I use the word community here, slightly different than other people use community, right? So there was like community is like, hey, everyone is included. Like, let's create these events where we have, everyone comes together. And like, for me, community is more about how each person on a group can build on top of each other, right? To do more, to execute more, and to learn from each other. And some cities have very vibrant communities, some cities don't. It tends to happen that anytime you form a community, the people that want to sell that community end up dominating, and it becomes less interesting, right? Because the community is not interested in being sold to, right? It's interested in building together.
Sure.
So it's really hard to maintain that community. And I think like people that have the opportunity to create these communities and fostering this connective tissue, they are super valuable, and they can do a lot here. I try to do a lot of that in Seattle, to get people going, like organizing dinners and events that are like reserved just for entrepreneurs or founders or investors. And like we build on top of each other, like we learn from each other, we learn what worked, what didn't work, right? What social media campaigns kind of like doesn't work anymore and used to work just a year ago, right? Like that's super valuable because it avoids you spending a lot of energy and time on things that are not valuable.
It's so important. And it's also such a good jumping off point for me to make a totally not awkward transition to another way in which you have helped take lessons from one community to another. Marcelo, you wrote a book recently, published in January of this year, I think, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So tell us a little bit about the book. Let's start with the title, the PRFAQ framework. What is the book? What is the title?
Yeah, PRFAQ stands for Press Release and Frequently Asked Questions. And it's a framework invented by Amazon in the early 2000s to discover, debate, and decide about innovation and strategy for its product, its business, its process and programs and everything. Amazon uses it every day, everywhere. At any given time, there's probably like 10,000 PRFAQs being written at Amazon and being reviewed by their team to find the right strategy before you execute on a plan, right? So a lot of people like to jump to execution too quickly, and PRFAQs say like, wait a second, let's just think a little bit about it, maybe for a few weeks or more if it is a very big opportunity, and then we will execute on that. So I was so excited about this framework when I joined Amazon and learned about it. I already knew before I joined Amazon, but I never experienced. Sure. When I was there, I was like, wow. When it hit me, I felt like founders, product leaders, executives everywhere could benefit so much from this framework.
Well, and let's talk about that a bit, right? I mean, in the world of corporate innovation, at least, the one that I live in, we often talk about taking the patterns and practices of the high-risk entrepreneurial startup ecosystem and adapting them for corporate use.
Yes.
you're really kind of going the other direction here, right? You're taking practice from what is now a large corporate, even if it's one where it's always day one, right, to founder and entrepreneurial communities, among others. So, what made you write the book, and then what were some of the key lessons that you learned along the way of delivering the project?
I think there is a few things that they are independent of like big corporations or startups. Like they are universal truths, right? Like understanding your customer and focusing on solving their problems. It doesn't matter what kind of company you work at. It doesn't matter if it is a restaurant or a hotel, or a car dealership. Like that's a key insight. So like if you write a
Hard to
book
do,
about
though. A lot of people skip over that.
they do. And that's why I felt like the PRFAQ was a great way to adapt, because it forces some universal truths on people using that framework. It doesn't matter if it is like a very small project that you're doing, or if you're building like a multi-billion dollar, line of business in your big corporation, right? Like there is some universal truths that apply to both of them. So I felt that like I could explain that story in a way that, focus on those principles, and abstract like what's really important for innovation.
And did you apply the PRFAQ framework to your approach to the book, the project itself?
I actually did. I did. And what's interesting about that is when I started writing the book, I wrote a PRFAQ about the book saying, I'm going to write a book for founders, because that has been my, area, my arena for 18 years. And as I wrote the PRFAQ for founders, it made me realize the problem that I was solving was not for founders, was for innovators. It's for anyone inventing or innovating anywhere. So it's like I took a step back and it's like, this is bigger than I originally thought. So it helped me like hone the target audience, the content, how to talk about the book. So I think it gave me the right level of clarity.
And what changed in your approach when you reframed it as being for innovators? Was it, you had a new and broader understanding of your customer, but how did that change your approach to the book?
Yeah, I had to abstract more like what is really important to include here, right? Instead of like very specific lessons about fundraising or about recruiting and like how to use this to support your startup, I had to think like what is really important here, like what are we really talking about, and I got to some like let's say principles like that help me think through this more clearly.
Yeah. Okay, so
you mentioned that there's a couple universal truths. And I'm just thinking for the folks listening right now, what would be the most important universal truth that they could take away from this episode today?
I would say focus on your customer first, right? If you're not solving a problem for your customer, nothing else matters. Like, doesn't matter how good your distribution is, how good your operations is, like you really have to start from that point of view. And there is two pieces to that. One is you have to understand the problem that they have and quantify that problem in terms of the frequency, the urgency, the needs, the solutions that they have, if they even care about solving that problem or not. And the second aspect is knowing if the solution that you're thinking about, that is more on the realm of ideation, is one that would address that problem. It's so many times people say like, here's the problem that customer have, here's the solution that I build, but they don't match. Right. And it's a weird thing.
It sounds so obvious, but it's so true, right? It is so true. Why is that so hard?
I think we sometimes fall in love with, an idea, right? Yeah. And we don't challenge ourselves. We don't seek the truth or to disconfirm what we already believe. Like confirmation bias is so powerful, right? Like the way you search Google, the way you talk with ChatGPT is always confirming your own biases, right? And when we are building products, it's the same thing. So the really good people, like they take a step back. They are very critical about themselves without, losing that conviction, without, they are not overconfident, right? They have the right level of confidence, but they are open to data and to input and to anecdotes that challenges them.
It's almost like you have to have the right amount of ego, but also the right amount of humility to find that balance.
Yeah, not easy.
Well,
Yeah.
it's not easy. And I mean, it's interesting. Whole books have been written on the topic of, for instance, the importance of falling in love with a problem, right? Versus
Yes.
the solution and the
Yes.
idea. Um, I think that it's something, I feel like this is well taught. I feel like we in the sort of the startup ecosystem, but also the academic innovation ecosystem, have done a reasonably good job of attempting to build curriculums and playbooks, et cetera, around this concept of, well, you actually need to understand your customer and the problem. It's not a solved problem, though. And it seems especially hard in an enterprise context. It seems especially hard in a large company or a division or a change maker in a large company. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Marcelo. Do you agree? Do you have any thoughts on if that's true, and if so, why?
Yeah, it is especially hard in big companies, right? I think there is many aspects to that. One of those is the culture of the organization, right? Most companies have a culture that fights change, right?
Yeah.
It's not that the people don't want to change, like the culture is designed in a way to be stable, right? To produce a certain
Sure.
level of output or a certain type of output. When you try to change how the job gets done or what the job that you're trying to do, like there are forces from everywhere that make it really hard. So usually you have some organizations that have like really good top-down mandate, not on what to innovate, but to innovate, right? They support innovation. They are not telling the teams what to do, but they are there to shield the teams from the BS that happens in the corporations and say like, no, go ahead, I have your back, right? When executives say something like that, then magic can happen. There is no guarantee, right? Because innovation is risky business. If you don't have failures, you're really not innovating. You're just like doing something obvious that should already exist and very likely exist already. Um, and so I think that's one of the problems that exists. The
Yeah.
other
Well,
one,
let's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
no, I was just going to say the other one is like there is the individual incentives at an organization,
Mhm.
right? To keep doing what they're doing. My promotion, my bonus, my stock options, all depend on that thing that I wrote on, like my annual review that I was going to do that next year, or my OKR. So like say, you should say like, oh, don't do that anymore. Let's do this other thing. People go like, wait a second. Like if I did 10 widgets this year, I'm going to get a 20% bonus. Like you're telling me not to do widgets anymore, to do this other thing. Like
Yeah.
I want my 20% bonus. So
Yeah.
it spreads through the organization so widely that it's really hard to control.
Well, it really is. And in fact, that comment reminds me of a conversation that lives totally rent free in my head. I will never forget it with an executive at a major Seattle company. I won't name them, but they're not, neither you or I have worked for them. But, where he basically said, look, I know how to hit and exceed my targets this quarter. I know exactly what I need to do. I know that I'm not going to hit or exceed my targets 2 years from now doing it this way. But if I change and I risk my current quarter, like, boom, like I
Yeah.
risk my bonus, I risk my team's health, I risk all kinds of things. And, and there is this interesting institutional momentum. But I want to dig in on this, both momentum and the idea that innovation involves change. Um, you said something really interesting. You said if there's not failure along the way, is it even innovation? I think that's a great question. I want to explore it. But first, maybe we'll do a little round the room on this. Like, what is innovation? Do you have a succinct definition that you like for what innovation even is?
I don't know if I have one that you're going to be like, oh, this is amazing. For me, the innovation is when you change or add or remove, you know, from something that already existed or needs to exist, right? And it can be process, it can be a product, it can be a service, it can even be a policy within a big company or government. All of that for me falls under the umbrella of innovation.
Yeah. I love it. I think that's totally true. Lane, what have you seen? What's the definition of innovation for you?
Well, see, I think I'm probably going to end up stealing your definition of innovation
Oh, if you steal
because
my thunder here, okay, yeah, go do it.
no, no, now I don't want to. But I don't, well, it's just we talk a lot about, and I think you kind of touched on it when you were asking this question, but it's like it's causing a change in behavior. And we've said it and defined this on a few different episodes. And it's something I think about all the time is like, this new thing came out. How did this change my behavior towards it? And I always like think of that example of when, they were trying to think of like keyless entry for vehicles. And they were like, is that like a phone? Is that, like, what does that look like? And then, the resistance to that. And so sometimes it's like you come up with a solution, but it's still not the right solution, but people still have that pain point. And so it's, you know what I mean? So it's, yeah, behavior change. I'm
Yeah,
rambling,
I mean,
but.
no, that's good. I mean, we talk about change, we talk about behavior. That is, so Marcel, my thought on this is that it's exactly what the combination, actually, I think of what you both just said, but that, what is innovation but some kind of change that gets people to naturally change their behavior, right, without being forced. And because it's better, it solves their problem, whatever it is. And so, if I'm sitting, what I want to know is if I'm sitting inside an organization and I know that there's a meaningful problem to be solved there, and I know, or at least I have a hypothesis around how that's going to change our customers, our partners, et cetera, lives, and I want to get started, how could I take the PRFAQ framework and get started? Like, what are the first
Mm.
5 steps I would take?
I think the PRFAQ is great for what you just described, right? Because what the PRFAQ does in that environment, right? Let's just like reestablish that a PRFAQ is a framework and a method to discover, debate, and decide on a strategy for innovation, right? For a new product, a new program, new policy, new process, whatever you want to do, or even change an existing one. And what it does is it brings everyone to the table, right? So usually you have the person that is leading the initiative, that is writing the PRFAQ, but they are not doing it in isolation. They are consulting with other folks. They are reviewing the document with other folks. They are seeking the truth, right? And the goal of the PRFAQ is not for you to, when you have a presentation, usually the goal of the presentation is for you to present, right? To give the final, idea and say like, ta-da, like give the like rubber stamp of approval, give me the green light, and we're going to execute. The PRFAQ is not like that. It's a document where everyone is collaborating. And when I mean everyone, I mean, peers and the people that are going to execute on it, and the executives and the other teams that are going to have, a stake in that game as well. For them to say like, how can we make this right? How can we find the truth about this idea? Right? Is this idea as big as we think it is, or as viable as we think it is? Is as viable, feasible as we think it is? So everyone is trying to collaborate to the single document, right? And what you get is at the end, when you have figured out what you want to do, there is no one else to buy in, right? Because everyone was part of the process of creating it and revising it and thinking through it, right? And many times, maybe more than 50% of the times, you don't get to the end because you discover that it wasn't a good idea. It wasn't viable. It wasn't feasible. It wasn't a problem that was big enough compared to other problems the organization had. No. So not all PRFAQs are going to lead to innovation.
And that is such a good thing. I mean, we touched on this already, right? It is such a good thing that we recognize that getting to a no is a win in innovation. But and I'll come back to that. But I have kind of what might be a tough question, actually. How does this process avoid like reverting to the mean? A consensus process that drives to the lowest common denominator of compromise rather than seeking the truth.
Yeah, and this comes from Amazon. Like they created this idea of this single-threaded leader, And the single-threaded leader is the person that is put in charge of a project, and their whole responsibility is that project, right? And in the early days of a project at Amazon, this person is in charge of the PRFAQ. That's it. It's a document, right? But they are the ones that are going to be making the call of what's included, what's not included. So they listen to everyone, but it's not a committee, right? They are not trying to let's vote what is the best idea here. No. They are taking input from, let's use a tech example. They're taking input from engineers, from designers, from product managers, from, the finance, the marketing team, the sales team, and they're incorporating the legal team. They're incorporating all that into the shape that they think is the right shape, right? Versus saying you don't want a legal person giving a ton of opinion about UX. You don't want the UX team giving a lot of opinion about which tech to use, right? Or anything like that. But you want to listen to all of them and try to combine and integrate these ideas into a cohesive story that actually is viable, feasible, valuable.
And the problem here is that you have to be in a position of where you feel a certain empowerment, right?
Yes.
To be that single-threaded leader.
Yes.
And that can get really tough. I mean, are you an advocate that people sort of, just take that responsibility on for themselves and kind of bulldoze their way through the organization? Or do you have to get alignment up and down an exec chain? Because not everyone has Amazon's culture.
I think it depends on the blast radius. And let's use that term to mean what kind of project are you talking about? What is the scope of that? If it is in the scope of your own work, the things that you do day in, day out, you own it. You can change it, right? It's your job. So you don't need anyone else's approval. If it is a scope that is slightly bigger than that, is going to affect your peers or other people in the organization, you can find yourself being the leader of that without an executive mandate. You just go and talk with the people and say hey, I'm thinking about doing this. I'm going to write this document. I'd like to collaborate with you. How do you feel about that? That's fine, right? Sometimes it's bigger, right? Sometimes it's something that is going to impact the entire organization, the entire company. On that case, you might need a mandate from executives saying yes, I will, bestow upon you the right to pursue this idea. But I'm going to be involved in the process of vetting, revising, and giving the final approval, right? The PRFAQ is what you do before you start the project, actually. Is the step zero. It's even to decide should we do this or not?
So one of the things that I have found the hardest in setting up innovation plans and projects in an enterprise environment, and this is so different, so wildly opposite in some ways from the world of startups, is at the planning phase, setting up metrics, measurements of success, KPIs, whatever indicators you can to give people in the blast radius comfort that you're making progress along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Is this notion of measurement part of the PRFAQ? Is that separate? How do you think about that?
It is part of the PRFAQ, but I want to be careful here because the PRFAQ itself is a strategy for the plan. You don't have the plan yet, right? So you're just here's the strategy that we're going to go. And once you get the green light, then you have the permission to start working on the plan. The idea is you want to bounce ideas, to think through all the problems and the legal aspects and get input before you actually invest into execution. So it should be very cheap, in quotes, because it can be expensive if you need to do a lot of market research and qualitative and quantitative research behind it, which sometimes you do. Right? If you're going to bet the house, you better have a lot of research, that the house is worth betting on this new idea. But most of the time, it's not like that. It's a feature, it's a new program, it's a new process that you're going to implement, or a small change in the product. So that's okay.
Yeah. Have you ever read the book, How Big Things Get Done? Dan
No,
Gardner
I have not.
It's such a fun book. It just tells the stories of a bunch of large scale projects, remodels, civil infrastructure projects, whatever, that go well and that don't. But this isn't a spoil. I actually highly recommend it. This doesn't take away anything when I say it kind of boils down to this idea that the projects that succeed are the ones where you invest the time to build the plan for the plan.
Yeah, I think PRFQ is about that, right? And
Yeah.
the one thing that is very valuable about PRFQ is just a document. So updating it is just like removing and adding words. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
require a big investment in infrastructure or coding or planning or like complex project management software. None of that. It's just like a Word or a Google Doc, and that's it.
Well, and it's something that I would encourage folks to go read on and learn about. It's not like, honestly, it sounds like a tool that I wish I had the discipline to deploy and use. So maybe we can follow up after the pod and you can teach me everything I need to know.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
thinking of a few use cases here.
yeah, more, yeah, more than a few that we probably could get clear on. And I do love these kind of simple, powerful frameworks. And Marcel, here's one of the things that I love. You are adapting this for cultural environments that are not Amazon, because every company is unique. But I think we should all be clear in this pod and among our audience, right, that the Amazon culture, driven by leadership principles built and enforced by Bezos, is very unique. So I'm actually curious. Do you have any examples that you like of the framework or a version of it being successfully used in another context? So maybe outside of technology, transportation firms, logistics, whatever. Do you have some examples or stories you can tell?
Yeah, I do. A friend of mine who is a founder in Seattle, and this is way before I wrote the book, by the way. I remember reading an article about his story, and he was looking for what to do next, right?
Yeah.
And like he had sold a startup, it was an okay success, and he was spending like the next year trying to figure out what to do next. He wanted to do a startup. And what he did basically was wrote a bunch of PRFAQs. And every time he had an idea, instead of like start building it, he would write the PRFAQ. He would review with his inner circle of advisor friends, investors,
Yeah.
other people that he was working with, and he would shoot them down, right? And the story goes that he wrote 4 of them. He pursued 4 different stories, 4 different PRFAQs without executing on any of them until he executed on the 4th one. And then he sold a company for more than $150 million based on that, 4th PRFAQ. So it's an example of, this is a single person, right? Like he didn't have to write anything. He could just like write a PowerPoint or like just tell the story to people, get feedback. But he decided to write the document because he understood the power of the writing as a form of thinking, and to elaborate ideas and as a form of gathering feedback as well. And that's a great success story for PRFAQs.
I love it. So I wanna move off PRFAQs a little, but I think we're gonna come back to them because I think they're a really good grounding for some of the conversation I want to have. But before we move off, I want to talk about how we connect them to narrative and storytelling. Right? We've seen extensive literature. I think there was a recent HBR article as well, we'll link to in the show notes, about the importance of telling a good story.
Yeah.
Right? To get big things done. And for those of us who maybe don't like being on stage or don't consider us storytellers, that's hard. But what do you think about this? Like, do you have thoughts on the importance of narrative to get things done? And presumably you're going to be able to draw a clean line from the PRFAQ framework to the narrative, but maybe go a little deeper and tell me, like, how does that work? How does this change the ability to tell a story?
Yeah, I think there's two aspects to this conversation. One is the narrative, the other is the storytelling, right? And I think the narrative like bring 3 very important things to the table in when we talk about PRFAQ or even other types of documents, right? So the first one is a narrative is a form of thinking. Like as you write something, you have to think through the connective tissue that goes on that, right? Like how this idea connects to this other idea. Does it make sense or not? Is it coherent or not? So it helps you individually think. So you can do that by yourself. That's a superpower, right? The second thing is when you write a document, you don't need to be present for someone to read that document. All right, so it makes ideas spread much more easily than if it is a presentation or even a demo. Like you need to be there to give a presentation or to give a demo. Writing is like you can share the document and say like, hey, consume this. It's particularly important if you're talking about like how do you onboard people to your organization or to your team, right? How do you bring them up to speed? Or like, why are we doing this? What we're doing? Like, here's a document. You can read it on your own time. And if you have questions, you can ask me. And the third aspect of that is it's much easier to get feedback in a document than it is to get in a presentation. Because the amount of content on that document is enough for people to understand. And if they don't, that's a sign that it's not clear enough or it hasn't been well written. So I call it a truth-seeking mechanism.
The thought process hasn't been there.
So it pulls people in. Now, writing can be technical, like very dry, full of data and like full of information, or it can be a story with emotional components to it, with people, with how this is going to create impact. What you want to do in a PRFAQ and other business documents, I think it's find the right mix. Right? I think people go too far sometimes on this is going to be great. Our users are going to love it. We're going to build the best product ever. But like you don't explain why and you don't explain how. There is no data behind it. Right? So it lacks credibility. It lacks trustworthiness. But if you have only data, then people are like, I don't get it. Like, why would someone buy this? Why would a company want to use this? Like, what is in it that the team is going to get excited about building? Like, you just gave a bunch of financial metrics or like KPIs or other things. So you want to have both. So I think your question was about like the impact of storytelling. I think storytelling is how we connect because we are humans after all, and we live in society. But like data is what brings the credibility. Like it's the evidence that this is worth pursuing. So when you have both, you have a very powerful story that's going to help, a very powerful narrative that's going to help like align people, motivate people, get people excited about executing on that. And the story is going to translate to the customer as well.
I love it. Okay. The problem with getting old, I have a bald spot that you can't see here. The problem is you learn about these amazing tools and you think back of all the times in your career when if you had only applied them,
I know
things would have, gone so much better.
Yes.
And there's a lot of zeros behind, some of the mistakes I made in a prior career at working at Microsoft that, maybe could have changed with this approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And our job now is to spread that knowledge so people don't make the same mistakes.
I love it. All right. I want to shift directions a bit. Because all of us straddle this world of startups and entrepreneurship and corporations. Like what are some of the similarities and differences that you've seen in how to approach innovation across the startup environment and the corporate environment? And maybe most importantly, where should the approach diverge?
Yes.
Where should it be really different if you're building outside an entity versus in? I don't know if you have any thoughts on this.
Yeah. I'll share a few things. I think, first of all, like that customer orientation, starting from the customer, it doesn't matter what size business you are.
Yeah. Got to do it everywhere.
It starts there, right? The one thing I would clarify is when you work in a big company, sometimes your customer is internal, right? And that's okay too.
Absolutely.
Right?
Sometimes your customer is yourself.
Yeah. And sometimes it's the employees of the organization. Sometimes you work on HR or IT. So your customers are those people. So start there, right? That's very valuable. The second thing we already talked about, the whole storytelling, the data, like also doesn't matter if it is a big company, startups, like same thing. The third thing I would say it's equal as well is the idea of like iteration, like trying, seeing what works, what doesn't work, start small, like build up, right? Valuable on both settings. What is really different is that startups can move at a much faster speed. There is like less red tape, less bureaucracy. At the same time, startups are going to make more mistakes, right? And in a big company, particularly if it is a public company, like that's kind of dangerous. So you have that trade-off of speed and safety, or compliance and all that stuff. The other thing is big companies sometimes have more layers of decision making, right? And that is there for a reason.
Sometimes, always.
Yes, always. Yes. It's there for a reason. It's not like useless. It's because they want to make sure that there is no two teams working on, things that are conflicting with each other. Like, so you need that level of decision making that escalates because there is someone that's going to understand, wait a second, this doesn't align with this other strategy that I was just in a meeting with. Let's make sure that like these things are aligning. The third thing is usually big companies have a lot more resources, and every project that they do, they bet a lot more. So it requires more upfront thinking and planning.
Is that right? So, in my experience, big companies have more resources for the very small number of things that they have more resources for.
Yeah, that's true.
But then you end up with all these people trying to drive innovation where frankly, it's like, half a PM and a junior dev going up against a VC funded, company.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. What I think about resources here is you're right about the human resources, but there is other aspects, right? For example, content or IT or legal. Like you're just a call away from calling a lawyer, your internal lawyer and counselor, and asking about some privacy law in the EU, and you get an answer in 1 hour. As a startup, you're going to have to find a lawyer, to create a contract with them, pay thousands of dollars, to ask your question. So, for most people at a big company, they're just like a phone call away from, getting something that they need to continue on the project. So that's changed quite a bit from one to the other. I don't know if that answered your full question, but I give some examples here.
Well, no, I think it does, because I think these points of divergence are super interesting, right? Because you're right, like there are some things that feel harder, and you have more stakeholder management, or maybe just a different type of stakeholder management. Your timelines might be different, but I guess the points of divergence to me actually show how much similarity there should be. Like fundamentally, the process of getting from a customer with a problem to something that's good enough that, the customer is going to shift to it has a lot, the times may change, but like there's a consistent playbook for the most part, I think. And I think sometimes we forget that.
Yeah.
In these different environments, we're like, I'm sitting at Microsoft. We can be super innovative because of X, Y, Z, and then you forget it, and then you realize you haven't innovated in a decade.
Yeah, that's right. And lack of innovation has a delayed effect, right? You usually don't notice until it's kind of late, and you're playing catch up. So I think companies should be always thinking about innovating, like being more efficient, in how they do things, but also considering like changing completely how they're doing things.
Yeah, there's a big Cupertino-based tech company that's getting a lot of flack these days. I can't speak to whether or not it's deserved, but on exactly that question.
Yeah.
So then when you're in a corporation, how do you know, or like when's a good time to think about your solution in-house versus engaging with a startup?
Oh, interesting question.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I don't think I have a definitive answer for that. I think actually I would look from the other way around, which is as a founder entrepreneur, is to qualify which corporations are actually good to work with as a startup and a small business, and which corporations are not. Right? Because a lot of corporations.
What would the qualifiers for that be?
Yeah, I think there is an element of like how much of bureaucracy there is in the procurement department, on their legal department, how open they are for like quick and dirty pilots versus pilots that take a year to plan, and the flip side of that answer would be from a corporation, you need to learn how to be more efficient. Right? If your procurement process takes 3 months to sign a new vendor on board, like you need to start there because everything else is going to be delayed, right? And like your team then is going to say like, we have to build in-house because I can't, deal with our procurement, legal, security, compliance team, because any new vendor is going to take 12 months. We're just going to do in-house. Like, it's not even an option, right? So that's very problematic. And that's why usually big companies do deals with big companies, but they rarely do deals with startups. And this is where innovation really is.
Well, this is an area I have so many strong opinions, but it is really interesting. You talk about 3 months to, just get onboarded as a vendor, right? I've worked with enterprises that A, take 6 to 12 months to get onboarded as a vendor, but B, along the way, they ask for things like 5 years of bank statements.
Yeah.
And if you don't have if your company's been around for 2 years, there's nothing, there's no path forward at those companies. But it is such an interesting question, because in answering that question, when I am with enterprise innovation leaders, I often ask them to look at, a fairly binary, simple question. Like, do we have a native right? Is our core competency, to use the MBA speak, to solve this problem or not? But, what occurs to me, and, the answer is, if so, maybe we look at doing it in-house. If not, buy or partner or whatever. But, it occurs to me that you can apply the PRFAQ framework before that decision, right? A plan for a plan. You can, inside the company, you should be able to apply this framework to answer the question, A, does this problem matter? But B, is it an in-house or, an outside problem to solve? And I actually kind of want to think about that a bit more, because I usually jump to this whole, are we good at this or not?
Yeah, and if you're really good at writing a PRFAQ, you're gonna learn that one of the things that you can include on the PRFAQ is like options that we looked at and why we chose the way we chose. All right, so you might say like, hey, we look at partnering with this company or using this vendor, and we look at like building in-house, and our recommendation is this because of this aspect. That is such a great fodder for conversation, right? For debate.
Yeah. Some of the most fun conversations I've had with startup founders trying to sell into the enterprise are about the role of folks like procurement, legal, and IT.
Yeah.
And the fact that, if you haven't worked in that environment, you don't realize that they are fundamentally risk mitigation organizations. Yes. All three of them. Right. And everybody's like, oh, of course, lawyers are risk mitigation. No, that's IT's job. That's procurement's job for sure. And boy, is that a hard mix with a fundamentally risk-based, innovation approach.
Yeah, I think big companies, they don't know how to right size the amount of risk mitigation based on, the partner or the vendor that they're doing. Like, if the risk of a vendor is so small, to your business, like, you should use a small size level of procurement, IT compliance, and legal, right? Like, if the impact on your business could be destroy your business, then use the full force of your teams, to make sure that that doesn't happen. And like that upscaling, downscaling of the effort is not common, because they like standards. They're going to do the same thing for every single vendor, and that doesn't work usually.
Yeah, it's the innovator's dilemma of, optimizing for efficiency at what you know how to do, and that's how you win for a while. Let's go down this startup route. I'm actually curious to know just a little bit, some more of your stories being on the inside of startups. Like, did you have what startup that you worked at in the leadership role or founding role are you most proud of? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I have several. I built a lot of startups. I always been proud of the teams that I built. Like people that are very hungry, that are like buying to the vision and the mission of the company. I think that's very important, because startups are hard. Like, the amount of failure that you get and the setbacks, and in terms of financial compensation, the risk is very high as well. So like, you wanna bring the right people. I would say one startup that I really enjoy is still going. It's called Hiya. We did spam call detection, and call
Seattle-based
branding.
Company, yeah.
It's a Seattle-based company. I joined when the startup was very small. I joined as a VP. I became the CTO of that startup there, and like, we grew the business tremendously over the time that I was there. and still going, still being very successful.
Well, and it's and talk about I think a problem that a lot of us can resonate with, right? Like also an unsolved problem, judging by the sheer number of spam calls that get and texts and everything else that gets through. But B, talk about a problem that has an intersection between the world of startups, the world of consumers, and the world of enterprise innovation, right? Because there's so many big incumbent players trying to navigate this.
Yeah, that's right. So on Hiya, we had to work with like big vendors, like telecommunication vendors, mobile operators, all these companies, incredibly hard to work with. Any contract would take 3 to 6 months after everyone is in agreement what we're gonna do. Right? This is not like part of the discovery. It's like after we agree on what we're going to do, still take 3 to 6 months just to, to get a contract signed. So it's really complicated. But what I really like about working at Hiya as well is that it was a transition from like a 50-person startup to 150-person startups. And when you get close to that 150-person line, whatever process, whatever tools, whatever frameworks you had, like they kind of don't work anymore. So the whole company is to adjust to this new size, right? Is the Dunbar number. So I learned to appreciate frameworks more and more as we grew because of that, because like people need to operate more independently as you grow, and like doing the right way really empowers innovation versus like hinders it.
Amazing.
As a founder, do you like building your product more or building your team more?
That's a good question. I don't think I ever thought about that, but I think I would go with product because my passion is really around solving customers' problems. Sometimes you don't even need a team. Sometimes you can do it yourself.
Very
right?
true. Very true.
And team building startups is really hard, is the hardest thing in my mind. It's much harder to build teams than to build products. Like people prefer to work at Amazon or Microsoft or Google than any startups any day of the week. So incredibly hard to build teams.
All right, that's fair.
I'm into that.
Yeah.
So important. So important, though. Yeah.
Once you build that winning team, though, I think like that there's a lot of joy and reward in that for sure. But okay, I want to switch gears because I have it's on everybody's mind, and I like to nerd out about this a lot. But recently, you posted something along the lines of being super optimistic about AI and how it's going to improve society. And even though we're living in a bubble right now, kind of from a hype perspective or an economic model perspective, you have high hopes. And so I'd love to kind of dive in on your thoughts about this and how do we steer the course of AI for good? And what do you think AI is in society looks like, say, 5 years from now, if things kind of go the way that you envision them to go?
Yeah,
wow, big question.
That's a big question, and I hate this speculation because I'm going to be wrong. So 5 years from now, I'm going to look back and it's like, man, you were so wrong about that. I am very optimistic about AI. I think AI is going to provide so much value to the world. Like we're going to discover the cure for diseases. We're going to discover more efficient ways of producing, storing energy. We're going to discover ways to build things cheaper. So more people are going to have access to housing and appliances and all kinds of tools that was hard to get. I think it's going to be a struggle in the next 5 years, but I think education is going to get better. Right? Because education has been too much focus on how good are you at memorizing things versus how good are you at thinking critically. And the memorization is not worth anymore because everything is going to be accessible. So there's going to be a change there. It's going to be very painful. The next 5 years, for sure. It already is, right? Like colleges and high schools and even middle schools are saying like, we're struggling to deal with this ChatGPT problem. Right? They really need to think about how to incorporate that into their learning environment. So I think in all aspects of life, AI is going to be good. And I know there is a lot of pushback in terms of the energy that AI consumes and the water consumption of AI. Like everything that I read about it says it's true. There is a high level of energy consumption and water consumption, but on a per person basis and a per capita basis is very tiny. And I know people don't like to hear that, but if you look at the research, the data doesn't back the everyone is screaming like all the water is gone. Like it's not that. So, but I also don't think AI is not going to bring a lot of new problems to the world, right? We are seeing like a lot of people using ChatGPT and AI for therapy or other use cases that is like backfire. We're going to figure out how to do that. There's going to be a lot of pain along the way. In the context of innovation, I think AI can really be a powerful tool, but you have to use it right. I would say the wrong way to use AI is to ask AI to write a strategy plan for me. That's terrible. AI is going to write a plan.
Outsource your brain. Doesn't work.
Yeah, it's not only that. AI is going to write a plan that you're going to read it and you're going to think it's brilliant because it's very convincing the way it writes. But it's actually a terrible plan because it's very undifferentiated. It's just using the average of its knowledge. It's picking up things from here and there. It's not giving you the opportunity to think through exactly what you want to do and all the opportunities out there. Often when we start with a plan, we end up with something that is very different because we evolve our thinking, right? Or what we discover. AI is just going to like drive all the way to the end. And that's a problem. On the other hand, I think I use AI, 100 times a day. I used to vibe code. I used to help me write. I used to do my research. I think it's fantastic as a research assistant. It can find information much more quickly. It can give you, every time I ask, like, give me the pros and cons of this. Right? I try to remove the confirmation bias. I don't say, like, what is good about X? I say, like, give me the pros and cons of X. And actually, every once in a while, it gives me something that is like, oh, I never thought about that angle. Right. So it's fantastic for that. It helps me open my eyes to blind spots, and also help me find what exists already. Sometimes I ask AI like, hey, is there a software that solves this problem? I don't even know what the solution is. And like it finds a few things. I go and verify that it actually exists just to make sure that it's not hallucinating. But it's great. The other thing AI is really good at, particularly for us that work in innovation, product, technology, is some people have writer's block, right? Or sometimes you have like difficulty getting started. AI can be really good and say like, hey, I have these 3 bullet points. Help me get started on this document. And it writes something. I don't like the style. I don't like how it writes. I try all variations, all tools. But I look at that, I read that, and I write my version of it. So it kind of like makes me faster at like getting past that writer block.
But
and AI is
interesting. No, finish your thought.
I was going to say AI is a fantastic editor, like, and a critic. Yeah. And if you say like, here is what I wrote, tell me what you think about it. It's so good at pointing not only like grammar issues, which is kind of easy nowadays, like you have tons of tools for that, but also like coherence issues. Yes. It goes like, wait a second, on this paragraph you said this, but on this other paragraph you said that. And you go like, oh yeah, that is conflicting. Let me rewrite this thing.
Yeah, but don't have it rewrite it for you, because then you get to this reversion to the mean. I think it's super interesting because, like, Lane, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about, and actually we've had internal conversations about this, Marcelo, a fair bit, right, is the idea that AI applied well amplifies the powers, passions, and expertise of a human. It doesn't replace them. You can't outsource your brain for that plan, but it gives people superpowers. And I don't know, I'm this optimist. I get the sense you are, but I am an optimist. I believe in people's both adaptability, but also the fact that humans have an innate drive to want to do things and get good at things, whatever their particular passion is. And now we have this whole new set of tools. But what I think is really interesting is all of your examples are about using AI to help you or to help others accomplish what they're trying to accomplish better.
Yeah.
You didn't say once, I can have AI do something for me. You can have AI help you delegating tasks and things. And I actually think that's really important because I think that, well, I think it's true, but that preserves space for optimism when you get a bunch of people that are, whether they're doomers or naysayers or whatever, that preserves space for optimism.
I think it's really important that we spread awareness about that distinction too, because that's what's going to keep the brain power going and the brain power intact is, I don't know, creating these parameters for the ethical use cases of AI. Because you do see a lot of examples of people that do just get AI to do stuff for them, right? And there's that whole fear of like people are going to stop thinking for themselves. And so I think it's like anything else. It's, I think, creating these parameters for which something should be used. I don't
You
know.
know what freaks me out? I agree. And what freaks me out about all of this? It's not the power of these tools that we have. It's not, kind of existential dread about human society or the singularity or anything like that. It's about the fact that we are shortening the horizon at which we can across which we can predict what the world is going to look like, and that forces societal innovation. And like, I will tell you, I think there's going to be a very rough period of time where society grapples, Marcelo, with the example of AI as therapists, grapples with, what does this look like in an educational context? Grapples with copyright and IP protection look like in a future world. There's a million examples of this. But the problem is, the technological change is coming faster than society can possibly identify new norms. And for me, I think that's really interesting and a little worrying.
Yeah, I agree. And if I go back to the microwave example, right? When microwaves came to be in the 50s and 60s, you see all these people trying to use microwave to do steaks and all this kind of food. They're like, that should not go into a microwave, right? Because people didn't understand how to use that tool correctly. And I think we're going to
Yeah.
go to that phase with AI. The difference, like you said, Ian, is that, it's much faster than, we can adapt as a society. So it's going to be very painful in the next 5 years because there's going to be good use cases that are going to solve cancer or, Alzheimer or diabetes, in ways that we didn't expect, but also is going to create a lot of new social problems. If you think about social media, for example, in the early 2000s, like we didn't have the immune system in our brain to understand disinformation and fraud and like everything that now we kind of like, we know, like this is fake news, this is just to spread rage bait to lead to engagement and to drive revenue. Like we learned that, but it took a decade or more. Right? With AI, we're not going to have that luxury. So it's going to be like, hey, it's going to be painful.
Yeah, it is. But, like, there will be painful moments, and I think there's going to be a bunch. But what I think is truly delightful, and not just for those of us that are crazy nerds, is this idea that the tools that we all have, to get to do whatever we want to do are just expanding at an exponential rate. And it's creating, in the innovation world. Yeah. It's creating so much opportunity. There's 10,000, new AI tools to solve. Okay. It's all over my TikTok, like bringing old photos to life.
Yeah.
Right. 15 years ago, probably possible at extreme expense, and there was no reason to build a business around it.
Yeah.
Now it's very viable, and I promise you that not only are there a bunch of people making a mint off of, $2, $5, $10 credit card swipes or whatever, but there are people who are genuinely touched by the colorization and animation of photos of their grandparents or their childhood memories or whatever it is. And like, cool, right? Super cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Innovation is interesting because no matter how you innovate, and I talk about this in the book, there is always two sides to it, right? There is always a very positive, very good thing that's going to happen out of innovation. And there is always, always something that might be considered bad by someone, right? Like if you make a process a lot more efficient, for example, in a corporate environment, someone might lose their job. So for that person, this innovation is terrible, right? Because they don't need to be there anymore. When you make call centers 10% more efficient, usually what happens is like 10% of people lose their job. So it's not always like rosy or always terrible. There is both sides.
There really are. Well,
that's a really good way to look at that.
Oh my gosh. This has been a really fun conversation, Marcelo. We're coming to the end of our time here. Before we wrap, though, wondering if you have any closing thoughts for the next generation of innovators, whether they are entrepreneurs building for themselves or whether they are agitators sitting inside a large corporation trying to drive change.
I would say don't start big, right? You can have a big vision. You can have a big horizons, like 10 years from now, I want to do this, but like really start what do you want to get done in the next 3 to 6 months, right? And build from there. Too many times people spend way too much energy thinking like how they're going to be big, and they need all the resources to do that. And just to discover like the market or the customer didn't care so much about that problem or that solution. So start small and build on top of the lessons that you just learned from what you just built.
I'll take that as wise advice. Amazing. And for folks that are interested in following you, learning more, where should we point them? Website for the book, your LinkedIn? Are you all over the TikToks? Where can they get in touch?
Yeah, all of the above. I think the easiest way is to go to the book's website, which is www.theprfaq.com, or search Google for PRFAQ book. And all my contact information, all my socials are there as well, including my email address.
Amazing. Well, this has been a really fun conversation.
So much. Yeah. Thanks for being on the show, Marcelo.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. This was great.
Yeah. Really fun. Thanks for coming on Innovators Inside. Lane and I had a blast, and have an amazing weekend.
You too.